The grand halls of Xipherian's royal palace were carved from shimmering obsidian, reflecting the glow of twin moons above. Inside, Princess Ciara stood near a massive balcony, gazing at the sky with quiet longing. Beyond the palace walls, a world she had never truly known stretched into the horizon. A world where she was not just a princess bound by duty, but a person free to make her own choices. Tonight, she felt restless. Her father, King Vorak, had called for an important meeting, where he would likely announce her arranged marriage to a noble Xipherian warrior. It was a political move, one meant to strengthen alliances, but to Ciara, it felt like a prison sentence. She turned as footsteps approached. It was her attendant, Lorana, a childhood friend who had long understood her frustrations. "You are not happy, my princess," Lorana said softly. Ciara sighed. "I never asked for this life, Lorana. I want to see the world beyond our palace. I want to know what exists outside our rules." Lorana hesitated before speaking. "Then perhaps tonight is your chance. A group of humans from the Europa colony have arrived for trade negotiations. They are at the outer landing docks." Ciara's silver eyes widened. Humans. She had heard stories of them. Reckless, unpredictable, yet strangely brilliant creatures who had survived against impossible odds. Her father considered them inferior, but she had always been curious. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Leaving the palace without permission was forbidden. If she was caught, her father's wrath would be severe. But the thought of another dull evening in the throne room, pretending to be the obedient daughter, was unbearable. "Take me there," Ciara whispered. Lorana nodded, leading her through hidden corridors known only to servants. They moved swiftly, avoiding the palace guards until they reached a side exit. From there, they slipped into the shadows, making their way toward the human docking area. The outer docks were alive with movement. Unlike the cold, disciplined atmosphere of the Xipherian court, this place buzzed with energy. Humans worked on their ships, laughing and talking freely, unbothered by the rigid customs that ruled Xipherian society. Ciara's gaze swept across the area, fascinated by the way humans interacted so casually, their faces open, their voices filled with raw emotion. She had never seen anything like it. And then her eyes landed on him. A human stood near one of the ships, his hands covered in grease as he worked on a mechanical panel. He was taller than most, his dark hair messy, his sleeves rolled up as if he cared little for formality. There was something different about him, something that made her heart beat faster. Before she could stop herself, she stepped closer. "That engine looks old," she said, trying to sound confident. The man looked up, startled. His eyes, deep brown and full of curiosity, met hers. For a moment, he simply stared, as if trying to figure out if she was real. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. "Well, hello there. Didn't expect a Xipherian princess to know anything about ship engines." Ciara's lips parted in shock. How did he know who she was? The man wiped his hands on a rag before extending one toward her. "Ethan Voss, engineer, occasional troublemaker. And you are?" Ciara hesitated before taking his hand. It was warm, calloused from years of work. "Ciara," she said simply. "Just Ciara?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. A small smile played on her lips. "Just Ciara." They talked for what felt like minutes but stretched into hours. Ethan spoke of Earth, of the challenges humans had faced in deep space, of the wild inventions and daring ideas that had kept them alive. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. Bold, unafraid, full of life. Ciara found herself drawn to his energy, to the way he spoke without fear. In Xipherian society, emotions were carefully controlled, but Ethan spoke with passion, his every word carrying weight and fire. "So, what's a princess doing sneaking around a docking bay?" he finally asked. Ciara hesitated, looking down. "I wanted to see something different." Ethan studied her for a moment before nodding. "Well, you found it." She met his gaze, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. But before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. Princess Ciara. Her heart stopped. Turning, she saw a group of Zephyrian guards marching toward her, their weapons gleaming under the docking lights. Ciara felt a jolt of fear. Her father must have found out. Ethan noticed the change in her expression. "Friends of yours?" he asked lightly, though his muscles tensed. "We have to leave," she whispered urgently. But before she could move, the guards surrounded them. "By order of King Vorak, you are to return to the palace immediately," the lead guard announced. "And the human is to be detained for questioning." Ciara's blood ran cold. If Ethan was taken, he would never leave Zypharian alive. She turned to him, her mind racing. "Ethan, run." But Ethan didn't move. He simply looked at her, then at the guards, and to her shock, he grinned. "I think I'll take my chances." Ciara's breath caught as Ethan reached for something behind him. She had a feeling that things were about to get very interesting. Ethan's grin didn't waver as the Zypharian guards tightened their formation around him and Ciara. His mind worked fast, calculating his options. He had been in dangerous situations before. Hostile planets, malfunctioning ships, bounty hunters, but never had he stood between an alien princess and her father's soldiers. Ciara's pulse pounded in her ears. She could see the captain of the guards, Commander Torvik, gripping his energy blade, ready to strike if Ethan resisted. "Ethan, don't fight them," she whispered. "That's not really my style," Ethan replied, his voice low but amused. Before anyone could react, Ethan moved. With a sudden, well-placed kick, he knocked over a stack of metal crates beside him. The heavy boxes crashed to the ground with a thunderous noise, sending sparks flying. The guards flinched, distracted just long enough for Ethan to grab Ciara's hand and pull her away. "Run," he shouted. Ciara didn't hesitate. Together, they sprinted toward the narrow alleys between the landing docks. Behind them, Torvik roared. After them. The guards chased them, their armored boots pounding against the ground. Ciara's heart raced. She had never run like this before, not in fear, not for freedom. The cool night air whipped against her skin as she followed Ethan, weaving through the maze of metal storage units and cargo containers. "Where are we going?" she gasped. Ethan glanced back, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Somewhere they won't find us." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a dead end, a towering steel wall too high to climb. Ciara turned, her breath catching. The guards were closing in. Ethan swore under his breath. They were trapped. A risky gamble. Torvik stepped forward, his expression hard. "You've caused enough trouble, human. Surrender now." Ciara clenched her fists. "Commander, let him go. He's done nothing wrong." Torvik's gaze flickered to her. "Your father gave strict orders, Princess. You are to return to the palace immediately. This human will be questioned for interfering with royal matters." Ethan crossed his arms. "I don't like the sound of that." Torvik took another step forward, his soldiers ready to strike. There was no escape. And then, boom! A deafening explosion shook the ground. The shockwave sent the guards stumbling, metal crates tumbling everywhere. "What the?" Torvik shouted. Ciara and Ethan turned to see a massive cargo ship lifting off nearby. Flames erupted from its engines, sending thick smoke into the air. The entire dock was thrown into chaos, workers shouting and running in every direction. Ethan didn't waste a second. "That's our chance," he yelled, grabbing Ciara's hand again. They bolted. Amid the confusion, they slipped past the disoriented guards, dodging falling debris and moving toward the human docking bay. Ciara's heart pounded as alarms blared around them. For the first time in her life, she was truly defying her father's rule. A desperate departure. Ethan led her to a sleek, compact starship parked at the far end of the docks. It wasn't as grand as the Zephyrian vessels, but it was fast, and more importantly, It was his. Sayara stared in awe as the ship's ramp lowered automatically. "You have your own ship?" she asked. Ethan smirked. "Of course. How else do you think I get into trouble?" Torvik's voice echoed behind them. "Stop them." Blaster shots rang through the air. Sayara ducked, her heart pounding as energy bolts struck the ship's hull. Ethan pulled her up the ramp, slamming the control panel to seal the entrance. The ship hummed to life. He sprinted to the pilot's seat and flipped several switches. The dashboard lit up, engines roaring. "Hold on tight, Princess." Sayara barely had time to grab onto a railing before the ship lurched upward, lifting off the ground just as more guards stormed into the dock. Torvik fired another shot, but the ship's shields deflected it. The last thing Sayara saw before they shot into the sky was her home disappearing beneath them. She had left the palace. She had left Zephyrian. She had escaped. In the stars, the ship soared through Zephyrian's atmosphere, breaking free of the planet's gravity. The blackness of space stretched before them, endless and full of unknown possibilities. Sayara slowly stood, her hands trembling. I can't believe we actually did it." Ethan leaned back in his seat, grinning. "You're free now, Princess." A strange mix of emotions filled her. Excitement, fear, anticipation. She had no idea what came next. But for the first time in her life, she was in control of her own fate. Sayara stood near the ship's viewport, staring at the stars. The realization of what she had done was finally sinking in. She had abandoned her royal duties, disobeyed her father, and fled with a human. Her entire life, she had been told that humans were unpredictable, reckless, and dangerous. But now, here she was, flying across the galaxy with one of them. Behind her, Ethan sat at the controls, hands moving swiftly across the dashboard as he adjusted their flight path. The ship hummed softly, its engines stabilizing after their escape from Zephyrian. "So, where do you want to go, Princess?" Ethan asked with a grin. Sayara turned to him, her golden eyes uncertain. I don't know." Ethan chuckled. "Figures. Guess it's my job to come up with a plan then." He leaned back in his seat, deep in thought. "We need a place to lay low. Somewhere the king's soldiers won't find us." Before Sayara could respond, the ship's warning system blared. Red lights flashed across the control panel. "Incoming White vessels DTKT." Ethan's smirk disappeared. "Looks like your father isn't wasting any time." Sayara's stomach tightened. "He sent the royal fleet after us." Ethan scanned the radar. Not the whole fleet. Just 2 interceptors, for now. A deep voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "This is Commander Torvik of the Zephyrian Royal Fleet. Surrender immediately, or we will open fire." Sayara's heart pounded. She knew Torvik well. He was one of her father's most trusted warriors, and he never gave empty threats. Ethan's fingers danced over the controls. "I hate it when people give me ultimatums." Sayara swallowed. "Ethan, we can't outrun them." Ethan shot her a confident grin. "We don't have to outrun them. We just have to outthink them." The Great Escape. The Zephyrian interceptors closed in fast, their sleek silver hulls gleaming against the darkness of space. Laser cannons glowed red, charging for a shot. Ethan gripped the flight controls. "All right, hold on to something." Before Sayara could react, the ship suddenly dove downward, spiraling into a high-speed maneuver. The force pressed her against her seat, her breath catching in her throat. "What are you doing?" she cried. Ethan grinned. "Buying us some time." The interceptors fired. Red laser bolts streaked through space, missing by inches as Ethan weaved the ship through an asteroid field. Massive rocks floated ahead, spinning lazily in the void. Sayara's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Only if you don't know what you're doing," Ethan replied, dodging past a large asteroid. The Zephyrian ships followed, their pilots struggling to match his reckless speed. One of the interceptors got too close. A smaller asteroid slammed into its side, sending it spinning out of control. The ship veered away, its systems failing. Sayara gasped. One down. Ethan smirked. And one to go. The second interceptor was still on them, its pilot determined. It fired again. A laser blast struck the rear of Ethan's ship, causing the cabin to shake violently. Sayara gripped the side of her seat. We can't take another hit like that. Ethan's eyes flickered to the radar. He spotted something just ahead. A massive asteroid with a narrow tunnel cutting through it. He grinned. Let's see if they can follow us through there. Before Sayara could protest, Ethan pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot straight toward the asteroid tunnel. The Sci-Fi pilot hesitated but followed. Sayara clenched her jaw as they entered the tunnel. The walls were dangerously close, and one wrong move would mean instant destruction. Ethan navigated carefully, adjusting the ship's wings to barely squeeze through. The interceptor wasn't as lucky. Its left wing clipped the rocky surface, sending it spiraling. Moments later, it exploded in a fiery blast behind them. Sayara's breath caught in her throat. You did it. Ethan exhaled, relieved. Told you, just had to outthink them. A new problem. With the interceptors gone, Ethan guided the ship away from the asteroid field and set a course toward neutral space. Sayara let out a shaky breath. My father won't stop hunting us. Ethan nodded. I know. That's why we need somewhere safe. Sayara hesitated. There's one place. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Yeah. She bit her lip. The outcast market. Ethan's eyes widened. Seriously. That place is crawling with criminals, bounty hunters, and people who'd sell their own mothers for credits. Sayara nodded. Exactly. My father's influence doesn't reach there. Ethan sighed. That's a bold move, princess. Sayara met his gaze. If I want to be free, I have to start making my own choices. And I choose this. Ethan studied her for a moment, then grinned. All right then. Outcast market, here we come. As the ship soared through the vastness of space, Sayara felt something she had never felt before. True freedom. The outcast market was not a place for the weak. It was a floating city, hidden in the void between lawless systems. Here, fugitives, criminals, and exiles gathered. A place where no government held power. If you had credits, you were welcome. If you had enemies, you had better be ready. Ethan's ship exited hyperspace and approached the market. The enormous space station came into view, a chaotic mess of metal platforms, glowing neon signs, and ships docking and leaving constantly. Sayara stared out the viewport, her golden eyes filled with uncertainty. I never thought I would come to a place like this. Ethan smirked. Well, there's a first time for everything, princess. Sayara crossed her arms. I told you to stop calling me that. Ethan chuckled. All right, what should I call you then? Your Highness. Lady Sayara. She sighed. Just Sayara is fine. Ethan nodded. All right, Sayara. Let's get moving. Entering the den of thieves. The ship landed in a dusty docking bay. The moment the doors opened, a wave of sounds and smells hit them. Shouting merchants, the scent of alien food, the distant hum of machines. Sayara stayed close to Ethan as they stepped onto the streets. She had never seen so many different species in one place. Some had glowing eyes, others had armored skin, and some walked on multiple legs. A hooded figure approached them. Newcomers, need a guide. Ethan shook his head. We're good. The figure chuckled. Suit yourself, just don't get robbed. Sayara glanced around. She could feel eyes watching them. She was used to being in the center of attention, but here it was different. Here, people weren't admiring her. They were measuring her worth. Ethan leaned close and whispered, Stay sharp. Everyone here is looking for an easy target. Sayara nodded. She was royalty, but she wasn't helpless. The contact. They navigated through the narrow streets until they reached a small, dark shop. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the air smelled of metal and grease. A tall, thin alien with 4 arms turned to face them. His yellow eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Ethan Carter, I never thought I'd see your face again." Ethan grinned. "Miss me, Varlo?" Varlo let out a raspy laugh. "No, but I do enjoy counting your debts." Ethan waved a hand. "We need supplies, a new ID, and information." Varlo eyed Ciara. "And who is this? She looks important." Ciara's heart pounded. Ethan placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "She's with me. That's all you need to know." Varlo smirked. "Fine, but that kind of mystery comes at a price." Ethan sighed. "We'll pay." Varlo leaned forward. "Good, because there's something you should know. The Zyfarian king has placed a bounty on both of you." Ciara stiffened. "A bounty?" Varlo nodded. 1,000,000 credits for your return, dead or alive. Nowhere left to run. Ethan clenched his fists. "That's a lot of money." Varlo smirked. "Too much for most people to ignore." Ciara's mind raced. Her father was serious. He was willing to hunt her down like a criminal. Varlo leaned closer. "Listen, kid, you need to disappear. Change your identity. Maybe even leave this galaxy." Ciara hesitated. Was she really ready to give up everything? Ethan's voice was firm. "We're not running. We just need a plan." Varlo shrugged. "Then you better think fast. Because bounty hunters are already here." At that moment, the shop's doors slammed open. A group of heavily armed figures stepped inside, their weapons raised. One of them, a tall reptilian alien, grinned. Well, look what we have here." Ethan pushed Ciara behind him. "Looks like we'll have to fight our way out." Ciara took a deep breath. She was ready. The moment the bounty hunters stepped inside, the air became heavy with danger. Their leader, a tall reptilian alien with scurred green scales, grinned. His red eyes locked onto Ciara, like a predator spotting prey. "Princess Ciara," he hissed, "your father wants you back. But I must admit, the dead part of dead or alive is much easier." Ethan immediately pushed Ciara behind him. His fingers tightened around his blaster, but he didn't raise it yet. "Let's not do this," Ethan said calmly. "You know how these things end." The bounty hunter chuckled. "Yes, with me getting rich." With a snap of his clawed fingers, his crew aimed their weapons. The first shot. Ethan's reflexes were faster. In an instant, he pulled Ciara down behind the counter and fired first. The blue energy blast hit the nearest hunter in the shoulder, making him stumble. Chaos erupted. Ciara's heart pounded as the air filled with blaster fire and shouting. Sparks flew as energy bolts struck the metal walls. Varlo dove for cover, cursing. "I just fixed this shop," he yelled. Ethan grabbed a metal container and threw it at one of the hunters, knocking his weapon away. He then spun and landed a solid punch on another's jaw, sending him crashing into a display of glowing tech devices. Ciara knew she couldn't just hide. One of the hunters spotted her and charged. She ducked under his swing and grabbed a nearby metal rod. With all her strength, she swung it into his ribs. The alien grunted and stumbled backward. Ethan grinned. "Nice hit." She didn't have time to celebrate. More hunters were closing in. A desperate escape. Varlo, still crouched behind the counter, grumbled. "This is bad for business. You two better have a way out." Ethan shot another bounty hunter and grabbed Ciara's hand. "Time to go." They rushed toward the back exit, but the bounty hunters weren't giving up. The leader fired his blaster, and the shot barely missed Ciara's head. Ethan spotted a large shelf full of explosives and power cells. A wild idea formed in his mind. "Varlo, what happens if I shoot that shelf?" Ethan asked. Varlo's yellow eyes widened. "A very big boom." Ethan smirked. "Perfect." Before Varlo could stop him, Ethan fired at the explosives. The entire shop shook as fire and smoke erupted, knocking everyone off their feet. The shockwave sent Ethan and Sayara tumbling through the back exit just in time. Running through the outcast market. The streets of the outcast market were never quiet, but now alarms blared as the explosion sent people running in panic. Ethan pulled Sayara to her feet. Keep moving. They weaved through the crowded streets, dodging merchants and fleeing civilians. Behind them, the bounty hunters were regaining their footing. A large hover truck rumbled past. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed Sayara's hand and jumped onto the back of it. The truck sped through the market, carrying them farther away. Sayara clung to Ethan's arm, breathing heavily. "That was insane," she said. Ethan grinned. "Yeah, but it worked." From the distance, they could hear the bounty hunter leader's furious roar. "You can't run forever. A plan for survival." The truck carried them to the outskirts of the station. They jumped off near an old docking bay, where Ethan's ship was hidden. Sayara wiped sweat from her brow. "What now?" Ethan leaned against a crate, catching his breath. "We need to leave. Now." Sayara hesitated. "If we run, they'll keep chasing us. My father won't stop." Ethan nodded. "Then we don't just run. We fight back." Sayara looked at him in surprise. "Fight back? Against an empire?" Ethan smirked. "We just made an enemy of the bounty hunters. Might as well make some friends too." Sayara thought for a moment. She had spent her whole life following orders, being a princess. Now she had a chance to take control of her own fate. She met Ethan's gaze. "All right, let's fight back." Ethan and Sayara didn't have much time. The bounty hunters were still searching for them. And soon, the king's forces would arrive. Running forever wasn't an option. They needed allies. Ethan leaned against a crate near his hidden ship, deep in thought. "We need to find someone who hates the king as much as we do." Sayara's violet eyes narrowed. "I know someone." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Sayara hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "A resistance group. Outcasts, rebels, former warriors. They hide in the ruins of an abandoned station near the asteroid belt." Ethan grinned. "Sounds like my kind of people." Journey to the hidden base. The old docking bay was empty, giving them a small window to escape. Ethan quickly prepped his ship, the starbound Shadow, while Sayara checked the scanners. "The bounty hunters are still searching the market," she said, "but we need to leave before they call reinforcements." Ethan fired up the engines, and the sleek ship lifted off, heading toward deep space. As they approached the asteroid belt, Sayara guided him toward an old station hidden among the floating rocks. "That's it," she said. "The rebels call it Haven." Ethan stared at the station, a massive metal structure, rusted and damaged, yet still alive with hidden power. "Let's hope they're friendly," he muttered. "A hostile welcome." As soon as they approached, the ship's alarms blared. "Warning. Target locked," the system announced. From the station, a pair of laser cannons aimed directly at them. A voice crackled over the comms. "Unidentified ship. Turn back now or be destroyed." Sayara leaned forward. "This is Princess Sayara of the Phyrexian Empire. I seek an audience." There was silence for a moment. Then the voice returned, suspicious but curious. "Princess Sayara, you have a lot of enemies. Why should we trust you?" Sayara took a deep breath. "Because I am no longer loyal to my father. I seek to fight against him." Another silence. Then, "Docking Bay 3 is open. Don't try anything stupid." Ethan smirked. Well, that went better than expected. Meeting the resistance. As they stepped off the ship, they were immediately surrounded by armed rebels. They looked rough. Former soldiers, bounty hunters, and exiles, all wearing mismatched armor and battle scars. A tall, battle-hardened woman stepped forward. Her gray hair was tied back, and her cybernetic arm gleamed under the station's lights. "Name's Captain Rhea," she said, studying Sayara. "Last time I checked, your kind didn't visit places like this." Sayara met her gaze. I'm not my father. Rhea raised an eyebrow. That remains to be seen. Ethan stepped in. Listen, we're not here to waste your time. The king has sent bounty hunters after us. It won't be long before his fleet follows. You want to strike back at him. This is your chance. The rebels muttered among themselves. Rhea folded her arms. You're asking us to go to war. Sayara nodded. I'm asking you to fight for freedom. A leader's decision. Rhea sighed and turned to her people. What do you all think? A burly alien with red skin stepped forward. The king exiled us. Took everything. If we get a chance to hit back, I say we take it. A hooded figure nodded. The empire's grown too powerful. If this princess truly stands against them, we should help her. Rhea turned back to Sayara and Ethan. Fine, we'll help. But if you betray us, we'll make sure you regret it. Ethan smirked. Fair enough. Sayara exhaled, relief washing over her. She had finally found allies willing to fight. But war was coming, and they had little time to prepare. The rebel base buzzed with energy. Fighters prepared their weapons, engineers patched up ships, and leaders debated battle plans. The war had begun. Sayara stood at the center of the strategy room, facing Captain Rhea and the other rebel leaders. We don't have the numbers to win in a direct fight, she said. But if we strike fast and hard, we can cripple my father's fleet before they reach us. Ethan leaned over the map. We need a trap, something that will force them into a weak position. Rhea smirked. I like the way you think, human. We might just have a chance. The plan. The rebels wouldn't wait for the king's fleet to attack. Instead, they would strike first. Their plan was simple. Lure the fleet into the asteroid belt. Disable their capital ship with a surprise EMP blast. Destroy the command center before reinforcements arrived. If we take down the king's flagship, the rest of his forces will lose coordination. Sayara explained. Without leadership, they'll be easy to defeat. Ethan nodded. Then let's make sure they never see it coming. The battle begins. The rebels launched from the station, their ships hiding within the asteroid field. Sayara and Ethan piloted the starbound Shadow, leading the attack. As expected, the king's fleet arrived. Dozens of warships, their metallic hulls reflecting the distant stars. Sayara's heart pounded. Her father was here. From the flagship, a cold, commanding voice echoed over the comms. Surrender, daughter. You cannot win. Sayara's jaw tightened. I was never yours to control. Then you are a traitor. No, she said. I am free. With that, Ethan fired the first shot. The trap springs. The king's fleet moved forward, pursuing Sayara's ship. The rebels waited until the enemy was deep in the asteroid belt, and then activated the EMP blast. Electric blue energy surged through space. The flagship's systems flickered, and for a moment, everything stopped. Now, Rhea commanded. The rebel ships emerged, lasers and missiles raining fire upon the stunned fleet. Ethan dodged through the chaos, taking out smaller fighters. Sayara locked onto the flagship's bridge. We need to finish this. The final confrontation. Ethan and Sayara landed aboard the disabled flagship, cutting through enemy soldiers as they stormed the command center. The king stood waiting. He was tall, his dark armor gleaming under the dim lights. His cold eyes locked onto Sayara. You were my greatest disappointment. Sayara held her weapon steady. And you were never my father. The king lunged, but Ethan was faster. He blasted the control panel, triggering a critical reactor overload. We need to go. Now. Sayara hesitated, then turned away. She wouldn't fight for his approval anymore. Together, she and Ethan escaped just as the flagship exploded, taking the king's empire with it. A new beginning. The battle was over. The rebels cheered. The king's reign had ended. Sayara looked at Ethan. So, what now? Ethan grinned. Wherever you want to go, princess. For the first time, Ciara was truly free, and she had chosen love over royalty.